How does consciousness, which is the same as what people refer to as spirit, fuse with a life form?
Yeah, it does so by way of the equally complex attraction rule. The thought level complexity of an unborn organism attracts an equally complex consciousness. This supports incremental increases for both forms of evolution, specie evolution and consolution, over the life of the organism. Upon the death of the life form, the complexity level of the organism is reduced to zero, and this breaks the equally complex attraction rule, separating the consciousness from the body. The consciousness then fuses with another equally complex organism to continue its upward ascent to higher thought levels.
How do you think this equally complex attraction got started?
It originated when lowest form consciousness infused into single-celled organisms, initiating a symbiotic positive loop exchange between specie evolution and consolution. If one increases, then the other must match that new level. The specie increases in complexity by way of DNA alterations, and individual consciousness increases in complexity by way of attaining higher thought levels. Now, if you think in terms of the early Earth, and there's the right elements for life, and there's water, and single-celled organisms get started. Right at that moment they get started, an equally complex minimal energy consciousness infuses into it. And that initiates that symbiotic positive loop exchange between the two. So each one of us got our start at the beginning of this cycle by infusing into a single-celled organism. And from there, working our way up by experiencing incrementally more evolved life forms to eventuate at the level we now are, the human level. So although we don't remember these incarnations, we each experienced a multitude of life form perspectives, each one helping us to attain a slightly higher thought level along a graduated path.
Okay, are you saying then that these two forms of evolution are taking place in each one of us at the same time?
Exactly. Wisdom teaches us that when two factions argue their position adamantly enough, there's often an element of truth to both of their arguments. In this case, Darwin was correct in all of his assertions that humans ascended from an ape-like creature, natural selection, survival of the fittest, but what's been hidden so far is that specie evolution has been taking place in tandem with consolution, the force driving individual consciousness evolution. But no one could have expected Darwin in his time to have discerned this other form of evolution taking place in all life forms. After all, it's represented by a different dimension. So in the final analysis, both science and theology have a basis of truth in their respective arguments regarding evolution, which I hope to prove by experiments from a prediction we'll discuss later.
Okay. Well, does intelligent design come into play here then?
The argument for intelligent design is that too much complexity exists in organisms for it to have simply arisen from physical evolution. The response to that argument relative to this theory is, on the one hand, the compression cycle of consolution initiates in such a natural and simplistic way. No interference in design is needed beyond the dynamic energy exchange of the Big Bang to get it all started. In that sense, the universe is a turnkey operation.
Turnkey, I like
yeah.
That. Yeah.
Once it gets started, it just, the cycling forces take care of it from there. On the other hand, though, we need to recognize the presence of lower consciousness, ourselves, and for that matter, all bits of lower consciousness in all life forms that originated from highest form consciousness, as an integral part of this ongoing hybrid form of tandem evolution. So, based on this theory, evolution is defined as a symbiotic positive loop exchange between species evolution and consolution, incrementally to ever higher levels of complexity for both, with the maximum level attainable relative to the ability to manipulate mass. So although both forms of evolution are moving towards greater complexity, if the ability to manipulate mass is restricted based on the niche that an animal fits into, then that species will hit a ceiling in its development. For example, the crocodile hasn't appreciably changed in 100 million years. But then again, it can only make a nest for its eggs and feed. So its ability to manipulate mass is restricted whereas humans have an infinite ability to manipulate mass, and therefore we have no ceiling for increased complexity. Thus we will continue to evolve.
Well, why is the word incrementally added to this definition?
Because it reflects minute physical alterations coupled with minute thought level increases occurring over hundreds of millions of years. A process that starts slowly but picks up speed as consciousness reaches the human level. The understanding that comes from a universe that is slowly compressing consciousness to incrementally higher thought levels over eons of time represents a universe that's very challenging and I think empowering to each individual. The idea that all of us have incremental increases that are earned each minute step along the way, and when all consciousness coalesces back into a single entity, we each add our ascended energy level to the force that causes the next Big Bang. Is a very powerful thought, don't you think?
Yeah, I agree. But going to the definition of evolution you gave earlier, it's very interesting, but you must realize it's not going to fully satisfy science or theology.
Yeah, true, I recognize that. However, this theory is not attempting to appease either faction. At the same time, though, it is interesting that we have a definition here that supports these two factions, which may eventually represent a common ground for both.
Yeah, back to our earlier discussion regarding this dual form of evolution, the famous discovery of the 3.2 million year old fossilized remains of Lucy, an Ethiopian woman. In her time, she would have had an individual consciousness equal to that life form that she was in, is that right?
Yes, she had the brain pan of a lower primate, yet stood upright like a modern hominid, with a consciousness at a level equal to that life form. Her upright stance left the upper limbs free to manipulate tools, and our opposable thumbs evolved. I find it fascinating when thinking about humankind's ascent to realize that it was out of our ability to manipulate mass, the other half of the universe from consciousness, that led to the development of the new brain. There's apparently a threshold of evolution which when passed supports a higher thought level, and of course that supports a higher consolution.
At one point you referred to the anthropic principle as part of a foundation for consolution. Why is that?
In 1973, Brandon Carter wrote a thesis for Cambridge University entitled The Anthropic Principle, which states that the arbitrary constants of physics just happen to provide for a universe that supports life, and any variation from those constants would not. His point was, it seems like no accident that the universe is designed to support life. And more recently, astronomers discovered that all observable galaxies have elements for life, the necessary elements for life, such as carbon, nitrogen, etc. So it's not an isolated case that our galaxy has these life-giving elements. For example, the calcium in our bones originated from stars compressing. I'll draw a triangle to show the interrelationship between these different ideas. And so if we have the anthropic principle here, and we have the different elements in the universe that support life here, and we have Darwin's Specie Evolution here, they all act as a foundation for consolution. Yeah, all other design considerations are reflective of that primary force.
Well, that makes sense.